Love Under the Parisian Sky by Oliver Hale. The bells of Notre Dame chimed their symphony over the bustling streets of Paris, where lovers and dreamers alike wandered beneath an endless canopy of gray skies. The air was cool, tinged with the faint scent of freshly baked baguettes and the earthy aroma of rain-soaked cobblestones. Among the crowd, Camille Dufresne hurried across Place de la Concorde, clutching a worn leather satchel against her chest. She'd been running late, as always, and the thought of missing her favorite literature class at the Sorbonne made her heart race. Camille was 27, a painter by passion but a librarian by trade. Her dark curls framed her face, often adorned with smudges of paint she forgot to wash off. Today, her olive-green trench coat flapped in the wind, and her boots splashed through shallow puddles as she made her way to the metro station. It was a life of small pleasures and minor inconveniences, but she loved it. Paris had a way of turning even the mundane into poetry. Across the Seine, under the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, Julien Moreau adjusted the strap of his camera bag and scanned the horizon. A photojournalist with an eye for the extraordinary, Julien's work often took him to the farthest corners of the world. Yet there was something about Paris, its textures, its people, its stories, that kept drawing him back. His thick scarf wrapped snugly around his neck, Julien's hazel eyes lingered on a couple laughing over coffee at a nearby cafe. Love was his favorite subject to capture, even if he had yet to experience it fully himself. That afternoon, fate wove their paths together. Julien, in search of candid moments, ventured into the Latin Quarter with his camera at the ready. He turned a corner near the Jardin des Plantes just as Camille emerged from her lecture, engrossed in a book she'd borrowed. Neither noticed the other until they collided, sending her satchel tumbling to the ground. "Oh, pardon?" Camille exclaimed, crouching to retrieve her belongings. Julien knelt beside her, already apologizing in return. "No, it's my fault entirely," he insisted, scooping up a stray notebook and a tube of burnt sienna paint. "I wasn't looking where I was going." As their hands brushed, Camille looked up and met his gaze. His disheveled brown hair and easy smile contrasted with her own harried demeanor. For a moment, neither spoke. Julien broke the silence, holding out her notebook. "Are you an artist?" he asked. Camille hesitated, then nodded. "Aspiring, perhaps." "And you, a collector of mishaps?" He chuckled, pointing to his camera. "A collector of stories, actually." They parted with polite smiles and a lingering sense of curiosity. Camille continued home to her small Montmartre apartment, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man with the camera. Julien, meanwhile, returned to his darkroom, where he developed the day's film. Among the images was one of Camille taken just moments before their collision. Her expression was soft, caught mid-thought, and the sunlight framed her like a Vermeer painting. Julien found himself staring at it longer than he intended. Days turned into weeks, and Paris spun on as it always did, alive with music, art, and possibility. Camille had nearly forgotten about Julien until she saw his photograph displayed at a gallery in Le Marais. It was unmistakably her, rendered with such tenderness that it made her breath catch. She found herself wandering through the exhibit, marveling at the way he captured fleeting moments, an elderly couple sharing a bench, children chasing pigeons in the park, and strangers lost in their thoughts. As she stood before her own image, a familiar voice interrupted. "What do you think?" Julien asked, appearing at her side. Camille turned, startled. "It's beautiful," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "Though I wish you'd asked my permission first." He winced. "Fair point. I'd be happy to take it down if you're uncomfortable." She shook her head. "No, it's flattering, really. Just unexpected." Over the course of the evening they talked about art, Paris, and their dreams. Julien's charm was disarming, and Camille found herself laughing more than she had in months. By the end of the night, he asked if he could photograph her again, this time with her consent. "Only if I can paint you in return," she countered, surprising herself. He grinned. "Deal." What began as an artistic exchange soon blossomed into something deeper. They spent afternoons wandering the city, Camille sketching while Julien snapped photos. He introduced her to hidden corners of Paris she'd never seen, a forgotten bookshop in the 5th arrondissement, a rooftop garden overlooking Sacré-Cœur, and a tiny jazz club where the music felt like an embrace. In turn, she taught him to see the world through a painter's eyes, finding beauty in shadows and imperfections. One rainy evening, they sought refuge in a café near the Canal Saint-Martin. Over steaming cups of chocolate chaude, Camille confessed her fears about pursuing art full-time. "What if I'm not good enough?" she asked, tracing the rim of her cup. Julien reached for her hand. "You already are, you just have to believe it." His unwavering faith in her lit a spark she hadn't felt in years. In return, Camille encouraged Julien to compile his photos into a book, something he'd long considered but never acted upon. Together, they became each other's greatest champions. But love in the city of light wasn't without its shadows. Julien's work often demanded travel, and Camille's burgeoning career as an artist required her full attention. There were weeks when their schedules clashed, and the distance between them felt insurmountable. Misunderstandings flared, as they do in any relationship, but their shared passion for storytelling always brought them back together. One pivotal moment came when Camille's first solo exhibition opened at a gallery in Montmartre. Julien, scheduled to be in Istanbul for an assignment, promised he'd be there but missed his flight due to a sudden change in his itinerary. Camille's disappointment was palpable. Yet when he surprised her the next morning with a bouquet of sunflowers and an apology, she couldn't stay angry. "You're infuriating," she muttered, though her smile betrayed her. "And you're breathtaking," he replied, pulling her into a kiss. As the seasons turned, their love deepened. On a crisp autumn morning, Julien took Camille to Pont des Arts, the pedestrian bridge adorned with thousands of love locks. Instead of a lock, he handed her a small sketchbook. Inside was a collection of his photographs, each paired with one of her drawings. "It's our story," he said softly, "and I want to keep adding to it for the rest of our lives." Tears welled in Camille's eyes as she realized what he was about to ask. Julien knelt, producing a simple silver ring. "Camille de Fresne, will you marry me?" Through her laughter and tears, she managed a breathless yes. The city seemed to hold its breath in that moment, as if Paris itself approved. Their wedding, a small and intimate affair, was held at a historic chapel in the Marais, attended by close friends and family. As they exchanged vows, the bells of Notre Dame rang out once more, a symphony for a love that had found its home beneath the Parisian sky. Years later, Camille and Julien's story continued to inspire. Their collaboration, a book titled Paris Through Two Lenses, became a bestseller, celebrating the magic of the city and the love that brought them together. And while their lives were far from perfect, they faced every challenge with the same spirit that had united them on that fateful day in the Latin Quarter. For in Paris, as they had learned, love wasn't just a feeling, it was an art, one they had mastered together.